wants to be the king? Let's have your hand first. So, who wants to be? I need 2 ladies. Madison, ladies. But it doesn't matter. You don't have to be a lady. Carson, do you want to?
What? Wait, what?
Be one of the other people?
Yes.
Okay. Come on up. So, I'm going to start reading, and this is during the Great Famine in Samaria. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad, okay, so you're the king, right?
Okay.
And then you're the mom, and then you're another mom, Carson.
I didn't know I was
Mustered his entire army and besieged Samaria. As a result, there was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head, listen to this, listen to these things that people are eating. A donkey's head sold for 80 pieces of silver.
Wow.
And a cup of dove's dung sold for 5 pieces of silver. So, people are eating those things. What do you guys think a dove's dung is? Dove's dung.
Think about it.
What do you think it is?
It's poop.
Yep. They were eating the duck's poop and paying a lot for it. Because that's how the famine was. So, as you can tell, they're suffering greatly. One day, as the king of Israel was walking along the wall of the city, you're the king, was walking along the wall of the city, la-di-da-di-da. A woman called to him, "Please help me, my lord, the king." The woman calls to him, "Please help me, my lord, my king." So think about how hungry they are, guys. Famine. He answered, "If the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do?" This is the king saying to the woman. I have neither food from the threshing floor nor wine from the press to give you. But then the king asked, "What is the matter?" She replied, this is her talking to the king, yelling up to him on his wall. She replied, "This woman said to me, 'Come on, let's eat our son today,' their own kid. 'Then we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son." She killed her own kid and ate him. Then the next day I said to her, 'Kill your son so we can eat him.' But she has hidden her son." When the king heard this, he tore his clothes in despair. Next was kid. "May God strike me down, even kill me, if I don't separate Elisha's head from his shoulders this very day," the king vowed. Okay. Elisha was sitting in his house with the elders of Israel. Elders of Israel. And the king sent a messenger to summon him. But before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "A murderer has sent a man to cut off my head. When he arrives, shut the door and keep him out, when we will soon hear his master's steps fall." Okay. While Elisha was still saying this, the messenger arrived. While he was still saying these words, the messenger had arrived at his door. And the king said, "All this misery is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?" Now, next chapter. Elisha replied, "Listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord says. By this time tomorrow, so think about this great famine, right? They're paying 80 silver coins for a cup, or for the head of a donkey, and 5 sterling things of silver for a cup of dove's poop. Okay? Now listen to this. This is what Elisha says. Listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord says. By this time tomorrow, in the markets of Samaria, where the famine is, 5 quarts of choice flour will cost only 1 piece of silver, and 10 quarts of barley grain is kind of like rice, will cost only 1 piece of silver. And that's extremely cheap compared to them paying 80 things for a donkey's head and 5 pieces for a little cup of dove poop. And now they can get, for 1 piece, 10 quarts of barley grain. The officer assisting the king said to the man of God, talking to Elijah, that couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven. See, now he's defying God and he's cursing God pretty much right there. So then Elijah replied, "You will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it." Now remember him saying that, okay? He says, he'll witness the whole thing happen just so he can be proved wrong, but he won't be able to eat any of it. Who thinks they know what that's going to mean in the future? Yeah, Carson. cut over to outside of the city, outside of Samaria, okay? So this is starting with these 4 lepers that are outside of the city walls, and this famine is going on this day, and they're all starving, and so everyone's thinking like, oh, we're gonna die anyway, so they're kind of just like, oh yeah, let's do whatever kind of thing. So now there were 4 men with leprosy sitting on the entrance of the city gates. Why should we sit here wanting to die? They asked each other. So they're thinking, why should we just sit here waiting to die? They're lepers, they have no money for food, they're outcasts, because lepers, no one had to be around them. Lepers and normal people were separated back in the day. Well, we will starve if we stay here, but with the famine in the city, we will starve if we go back there. So we might as well go out and surrender to the Armenian army. If they let us live, so much the better. But if they kill us, we would have died anyway. So they don't even care if they're going to die. They're just like, it's that bad at a point of the famine. So at twilight, they set out for camp of the Armenians. But when they came to the edge of the camp, no one was there. They're all gone. Okay? Now listen, this is why. For the Lord had caused the Armenian army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots and the galloping of horses and the sounds of a great army approaching. The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us, is what the Armenian army is thinking. They cried to one another, so they panicked and ran into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, donkeys, and everything else as they fled for their lives. Lepers arrived at the edge of the camp. They went into one tent after night, carried off silver and gold and clothing, and hid it. Finally, they said to each other, this is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't supposed to be eating all of this. We should be sharing it with everyone, because this is a day to rejoice. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace. So now, they're not looking all like disgusting, starving and stuff. Now they're looking all happy, and they're rushing back to the palace to go tell, and all the people who are there starving, and they told the gatekeepers what had happened. We went out to the Armenian camp. This is them telling all the people. We went out to the Armenian camp, they said, and no one was there, and the horses and donkeys were tethered, and the tents were all in order, but there wasn't a single person around. Then the gatekeepers shouted the news to the people in the palace. So, the king got up instantly. Out of his bed in the middle of the night, because I know what has happened. The Armenians know we are starving, so they have left their camp and have hidden in the fields. They are expecting us to leave the city, and then they will take us alive and capture the city. So this is what the king is thinking, what the Armenians are planning. But in reality, God just make them hear noises and scare them and make them flee, and they fled for their lives. Now one of his officers replied, let them take 5 of the remaining horses. If something happens to them, it will be better. It will be no worse than if they stay here and die with the rest of us. So there it is again. Eventually they sent out chariots, and they go scout out the Armenian camp, and sure enough, they find all the goods out here, and then they see it all, and they come back to the people, announcing that they are, in fact, the Armenian camp is there intact, and no one is there, and it is free for the taking. So all the people, they go rushing over there. Then the people of Samaria rushed out and plundered the Armenian camp. So it was true that 5 quarts of choice flour were sold that day for 1 piece of silver, which is who Elisha had predicted, and 10 quarts of barley grain were sold for 1 piece of silver, just as the Lord had promised, Elijah had prophesied. The king appointed his officer to control the traffic at the gate. Listen to this. But he was knocked down and trampled to death as the people rushed out. Now, what did Elisha say earlier? He was standing there, and he was supposed to be monitoring traffic, and he was watching all the stuff and all the food, but then he just got trampled, so he didn't even get to partake in it, and he just died. Just because he had cursed and he said it couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven. And all he did was make the people hear a little noise. So everything happened exactly as the man of God had predicted, which is Elisha, when the king came to his house. The man of God had said to the king, by this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 5 quarts of choice flour will cost 1 piece of silver, and 10 quarts of barley will cost 1 piece of silver. The king's officer had replied, that could happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven, and the man of God had said, you will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it. And so it was, for the people trampled him to death at the gate. See how important that is? This chapter starts with that whole phrase of their conversation, and then it ends it with reinforcing and showing that what he had prophesied did come true, everything come true, and it shows that the person who cursed God the story did not end well for them.